Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Great Debaters Contest. I am your host, Esperantia Kapanga.
And I am Chris Buru.
And today we're having two giant schools in Kiambu region, Mangu High School on one side, promising that they're going to bring their A-game and teamwork to the table today. And on the other side, we have Nova Pioneer girls that are saying they are a unique lot that promise to work hard to change the world and change our perspective about the topic of discussion today.
Opposing the motion that boarding schools should be banned is Nova Pioneer Girls. Opposing the motion is Mangu High School. Opposer number one, you have 3 minutes to make a statement.
The tears have been seen, the cries have been felt, but the volume is way too up to silence the cries. I, Faith Marindich, echo these voices by proposing the motion that states boarding schools should be banned. Boarding schools, familiar, right? Boarding schools are schools that provide education for children who live on the premises. Now, the motion at hand is telling us that we must completely stop the existence of boarding schools, stating boarding schools should be banned. When one is placed in boarding school at a young age, they tend to think that their parents don't love them, and in the end, they harbor resentment towards them, which makes them turn to their peers seeking advice. But what are they seeking? Are they seeking good advice? Are they seeking bad advice? Do we really want our children to think that we don't love them? A study conducted in 2013 by the University of Nairobi, the Department of Psychiatry, it revealed that students who go to boarding schools are likely to have confusion, and they're likely to develop psychopathology. Do you want your child to develop psychopathology? It also revealed something very crucial: suicidal behavior. Students who go to boarding schools at a young age are likely to develop suicidal behavior. Do parents like their children to develop suicidal behavior? Do you want your child to go to school to attain education, or to go to school that gives them a property to develop suicidal behavior? No, we want our children to prosper. We want them to go and be future leaders, future innovators. But taking them to boarding schools, not a good idea. Well, let me tell you, Roald Dahl, who was sent to boarding school at a young age, a very young age, it affected him in his future life. How? It made him change his writing to sadism. This is a clear effect of taking students to boarding schools. We should let children be children. Let them have that bond with their parents. Let them be connected. Let's not lie to our children. Let's not make them face a bad future for themselves. Now, let's think about the future at hand. It is time for these voices to be heard. It is time to awaken the cries of the unheard. And by the unheard, I mean these children.
First opposer, you have 3 minutes to present your case.
My name is Sean Kinodia from Mangu High School. And today I stand here to oppose the motion that boarding schools should be banned. But when we look at this, I'd first like to oppose what my dear proposer has said, that boarding schools give students a proper breeding place for psychopathologic issues. But I have a question. This great school we are in, the motto is thinkers, leaders, and doers. And I also believe that some of these boarding schools give great people, especially in our country. For example, His Excellency Mwai Kibaki came from the Mangu High School, which is a boarding school. My second point, that boarding schools encourage diversity, cultural diversity. People from different parts of the country come together and show the fact that they are different. It encourages you as a student, or the person as a student, to accept that diversity in people and to be able to interact with them even at higher levels of life. I also believe that through boarding schools, students are able to concentrate more in their studies. Why? You will hear that there have been floods in Machakos of late, floods in the Ukambani region of late. But students who have been in school have no reason to be worried. Why? They are staying in school and therefore they get their quality education from there. Not worrying, how will I go to school tomorrow with these floods? They've destroyed how I'll go to school. Also, schools provide better facilities than day-going schools. I can say for a fact that there are some students who do not have access to fields like this. There are students who don't have access to musical instruments. They will be able to develop their talents and their own characters as human beings or as a whole to become a better person in the society. I also believe that high schools or that people who go to boarding schools become more endurant because they are able to cope through things that happen to most adults in life. Therefore, when they are released towards the world, they are able to cope with these things, look for specific ways to go through their life without shedding too many tears. That was Sean Kenodia from Mangu High School.
Second proposer, you have 3 minutes for your rebuttal.
This is Daniela Cristola Lang from the Nova Pioneer Girls High School, here to represent not only myself, but also the thousands of children suffering because of this cancer that's eating up our young minds and our future generations, this cancer that is called boarding school. Now, one of our opposers said that the boarding school system has produced great leaders, influential leaders. And of course, I do not disagree with that. But ladies and gentlemen, have you ever taken your time to think about those minds that could have been great? Those minds that could have made a difference in our country, they could have changed the world. But because of boarding school, because of the abuse and the emotional and mental trauma they went through, they weren't able to accomplish their full potential. This boarding school, it's eating up our future generations. It is destroying our future leaders, and in return, it's destroying us. Research shows that over 72.5% of people who have gone to boarding school have experienced not only physical and mental, but also sexual abuse. Do you know what type of effects those could have on a child, a young mind that is still developing? Let's not forget that this child has been detached from their parent. And of course, they might not have enough emotional support to make them go through this. This leads to things like depression, low self-esteem, low academic performance, and suicidal thoughts. Suicide. According to the World Health Organization, it's one of the leading causes of death among school-going children. Let's not forget that these are the minds who are able to make a difference in the world. But what are we doing to them? We are slowly destroying them. Is this what we want for us? Is this how we are going to develop as Earth? How are we supposed to ensure healthy lives and well-being for all at all ages if we keep on allowing them to go through this type of suffering? In 2015 only, there were over 120 cases of schools being burnt down. Not by people from outside, but by the students who go to that school. Now, students don't just wake up and decide to burn their school down. This pressure, this emotion builds up over time. It is caused by long periods of suffering, bullying, social stratification. These are the type of things that are affecting our young children today. Do we want this? Is this what is going to help us grow and develop as a nation? How are we supposed to make sure that they have quality education if they are being abused, if they are being tortured? Countries like USA, over 80% of their of their schools are day schools. And yes, of course, boarding schools have produced great leaders, but what about Barack Obama? What about Steve Jobs and Abraham Lincoln? They went to day schools, and they have been able to make one of the greatest differences this world has ever seen. This is why we need to ban boarding schools. And after that, it's easy. Our future is pretty much guaranteed. My name is Daniela Lang. Think about what I've just said.
Second opposer, you have 3 minutes for your rebuttal.
I have listened and listened to the wails of the weak, And now I am a judge, not as a god, but as a man. Marvel's The Punisher. I am Brian Titus, the Mangu High School, ready to oppose the notion that boarding schools should be banned. First, a question to the proposers. As children walk home, we have had cases of sexual abuse. Will this sexual abuse on their way home cause any less a traumatic effect in comparison to that happens at school? I'm not justifying boarding schools. And as for bullying, even school-going, day school children experience bullying. I'm going to keep it simple. Most of us have cell phones. Some of us are not liked in school. And with these cell phones, when you're at home, for most schools in boarding, they are restricted. But when you get home, there is cyberbullying that has really been on the rise for the past couple of years. I propose that boarding schools stay, not for the wealthy, but for people of the lower class in the society. If you are to consider that children are actually trying to stay in school rather than go home, they are afraid. Children between the age of 8 is too young to go to boarding, but yet he or she is still trying to stay there, just so that they can avoid their parents at home, they can avoid torture, they can avoid early marriages, so that they can avoid female genital mutilation, to avoid being recruited into groups that will not help this child himself grow. In real honesty, parents themselves are actually looking for chances to go to boarding schools and stay there in areas such as Samburu and Turkana. This is so funny because such schools provide food and shelter, which is better than the life that they are experiencing back at home. I am asking you all to think as human beings. Banning is not the solution, but we will rather look for others. I'm Brian Titus, Mangu High School. Thank you.
For the question session, the proposers have been asked, what happens to the students that come from very far areas from the schools if the schools are no longer boarding schools and now become day schools? The opposers, on the other hand, have been asked, after stating that schools get flooded and thus will not be conducive for the students to go to, what happens? Because we have seen before in the past that school opening dates have been postponed due to floods. So can they elaborate what it is exactly that they meant from that statement? Third proposer, you have 3 minutes.
Boarding schools should be banned. My name is Karanganga from Nova Pioneer Girls, and I am here to propose this motion. So the question was asked by a student from Nova Pioneer Boys. So you asked students who come from far will not be able or will have a hard time going to school if we ban boarding schools. Now, I have a question for you as well, sir. Have you heard of county and sub-county schools? There are schools in each and every county and sub-county to make sure that students do not have to go far. If you want to go far, it is your personal decision, but there is a school in your neighborhood that can take you in. Therefore, what's the need for boarding schools? Nothing. We see that sometimes in a boarding school, somebody spends a significant amount of time in class. Now, the recommended time one should be in class is 8 hours. And yet you see in boarding schools, this is not the case. One spends 8 hours learning and an extra 4 hours during preps. How does that affect the students? You are spending half of your day in class, whereas in a day school, you'd only spend the recommended 8 hours. Now, there is a law known as the Law of Diminishing Returns by Johann Henrich, which states that at some point, your brain reaches saturation, and there is nothing else that you are doing beyond that point of saturation that benefits you. Therefore, the amount of effort put versus the results does not add up. Why? You are spending too much time in class when you could be outside playing. Instead, you are taking 12 hours, half of your day in class. For what, I tell you? For what? Good grades? Good grades that you will not achieve due to this law? I think not. We will now look to the affordability of boarding versus day schools. Now, the average boarding school costs about 61,000 shillings in Kenya versus day schools which cost only about 22,000 Kenyan shillings. Now, I know, yes, some will argue about free secondary education and free primary education. But let me ask you, when you go to a boarding school, is your soap bought for you by the school? Is your djembe that you're required to farm with bought for you by the school since you're in agriculture? Are the buckets bought for you by the school? I think not. The total cost will still come to about the 20,000 you are paying for in a day school. So I ask you again, what is the benefit of a boarding school? We should abolish boarding schools, and boarding schools should be banned. Thank you.
Third opposer, you have 3 minutes to answer your question.
Before I begin to propose this motion, I first must answer the question by the young lady from Maryhill. You asked, what happens to the people who their schools are also flooded? Take this into consideration. There are people who live in areas where their homes are completely destroyed. Coming to school was a lifesaver. I don't refuse. There are those who couldn't escape the jaws of this flood. But for the lucky few who could, don't they have boarding to thank? And also, it seems that our proposers do not necessarily disagree with us. What they are condemning mainly is taking children to boarding at an early age. Boarding has so many advantages. It is just that we do not want to accept reality. Boarding schools should not be banned. Maybe what we can do is regulate when we take our kids to boarding school, because as parents, we have the responsibility to know when our children are ready to be released into the world. Also, I think that we are usually afraid of so many things. We are afraid of letting our children go into boarding school, saying that it is exposing them to this and that, drugs and this. That is real. That is a real world. All you're doing is teaching your child to be exposed to such an environment at an early age, and with guidance from people like teachers. In the real world, there are no teachers. There are no people to correct you, people to tell you you're doing the wrong thing. There are only people to mislead you and people to condemn you after you've done wrong. Also, I think boarding is an opportunity to fully maximize your teachers. Look at boarding. Can you compare the hours a boarding student has and the hours that a day school student has? The boarding student is exposed to so much time with the teachers, can be able to interact and ask questions and enjoy the privileges of being in a school. We have seen schools with facilities like libraries. Tell me, what are the disadvantages of boarding so far? Let's move to sports and abilities. Boarding school is able to give children opportunities to be able to maximize on their talents and sports. Look at this school, for example. It is based on working on the development of a student in full, including the sports. If you live in places like Mandera, where will you get a basketball such as this that we are in? Where will you get a field where you can play hockey? Do you see what I mean? Also, we have the issue of boarding teaches kids how to be responsible. A kid learns how to handle his own money. I do not refuse. There are those who cannot handle. There are those who don't have the opportunity to receive pocket money. But for those who do, they are taught how to handle their money. And for those who receive little, the little that they have, they are taught how to spend it wisely.
And so I do have to say that this motion is evident. There is no need to abolish boarding schools. Let us take our children to boarding schools if we feel that there is a need to do so. And if we feel that we want them to stay at home and risk them becoming couch potatoes, so be it. Thank you.
The proposition, you have 1 minute to wrap up your case.
Daniela Olang, here again proposing the motion that boarding schools should be banned. My fellow proposer said that children of all ages stay in class. It's too long. Let's not forget about the attention span of a child. This child spends around 8 hours in class and then 4 hours of prep on top. That's half a day they have spent in school. There's something called saturation of the brain. When the brain is at high levels of concentration for too many hours, there's a point where it stops being productive. And is this what we want? A generation of non-productive learners? Let's not forget that vices like female genital mutilation and rape don't result from the schooling system. It is not their fault that they're in a day school, but it is a matter of society. Let us not forget that 80% of the society went to a boarding school. Don't you think it's connected? Couldn't their dark past and experiences inspire them to do such an inhumane act? Someone once said, children are the beholders of the future, but if the hands of the beholders are bruised, then what is of it? Thank you.
The opposition, you have 1 minute to wrap up your case.
You have to forgive me for not introducing myself, but I had to save the best for last. My name is Ian Joe from Mangu High School, and I am here to close by saying that boarding schools provide security, environment, and the conditions to nurture students into our leaders of tomorrow and to the next people that we will depend on, presidents of tomorrow, and scientists, and all the great people whose names we'll mention. Thank you.
Nova Pioneer Girls, Faith, as a first speaker, you came out really strongly. Though I'm afraid that you didn't really quite use up the 3 minutes. Of course, that might be attributed to the fact that you didn't have enough time to prepare, but I believe you can do even better next time. Daniela, you stood out for me. You are really passionate. You have good debating skills. You also have relevant examples. For Karen is a confident speaker. There was good use of body language. You quoted some figures, though you didn't mention the sources. I believe you can still do better than this. All the best to both teams.
So don't ban Mangu High School. That was your proposition. Sin, I love the examples you started by giving us. The diversity that comes along with having boarding schools and the likes. I think every time you give evidence or a fact or a claim, it's good to say, explain to us that diversity and what it does. Don't just say, it's a place of diversity. Diversity in terms of food, or what did you mean? For Brian, I think, Brian, what stood out for me is the submissions that you gave. Cyberbullying at home, that could still happen at home. You know, attacks that could also happen on the way. And you gave especially a very good example that boarding schools are a safe haven, especially for FGM targets. Those were very commendable submissions that you gave. However, how you deliver matters. So you want to work on your style, so that at least we can feel, these were very passionate points that you're giving us. But, you know, you just had a monotonous style and you went on. Ian, I like the twist that you brought in. Now, this time around you brought a twist which almost veered off from where you stand, because you started speaking about don't ban but regulate the time they can attend such schools. So sometimes when you want to give a stand as a team, you want to maintain that as a team. So sometimes it can be against your team as well. But very good reasoning, and I love your reasoning. I listened to you all through.
On to the numbers. We have 69% on one side and 72% on the other side. And the winners today are Nova Pioneer Girls. Congratulations to Nova Pioneer Girls High School, and to Mangu High School, you live to fight another day. At the Great Debaters Contest, it's thank you for viewing us today. See you next time. I have been your host, Esperanza Kapanga.
And I am Chris Boru.